Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the College of Continuing and Professional Studies webinar, Cultivate Emotional Intelligence to Manage Stress. Thank you so much for being with us today. Next slide. It's a pleasure to have you all here this afternoon. My name is Lisa Beckham, and I'll be your moderator, for today's webinar. If you have any questions about this webinar or other programs that we offer, my contact information will be on the last slide of this presentation. There are some logistical items I'd like to address before we begin. I ask that you please submit your questions throughout the webinar so we can address them during the Q&A portion of this presentation. To submit your questions, go to the description on the bottom of the YouTube video and click on the link to the question form. Live captioning is also available as a link to the YouTube description box. To view live captioning, click the stream text link in the YouTube description box. We will send an email within a week with a link to the recording of this webinar. The link will be sent to the email address you submitted during registration. I'm honored to introduce the topic for today's webinar, Cultivate Emotional Intelligence to Manage Stress. Are you looking for techniques to fortify your resilience and well-being? It goes without saying that stress has a long-standing factor in our professional and personal lives, even before the pandemic. We all can get frazzled at different times and react to it in different ways, but stress is something we can all relate to, and a well-developed emotional intelligence is key to minimizing its effects. During this webinar, we'll explore the nature and importance of emotional intelligence, a research-based emotional intelligence model that addresses stress management, how to evaluate our overall ourselves, on three of the key components: flexibility, stress tolerance, and optimism, and strategies for strengthening these components of our emotional intelligence for better workplace and personal satisfaction. It's a privilege to introduce the presenter for today's webinar, Karen Gotch. As a founder and principal of Global Collaboration Insights, Karen Gotch partners with her clients to design and deliver strategic organizational development solutions. Drawing on years of management experience, she consults and coaches on critical needs, including leadership, team building, and emotional and cultural intelligence, specializing in effective communication on global virtual teams. As a researcher and speaker, she is frequently invited to present her work at national and international conferences. Karen also serves as University of Minnesota faculty on practice and on the board of Literacy Minnesota. She earned her PhD from the University of Minnesota and has partnered with the College of Continuing and Professional Studies for over 10 years. Karen, it's so great to have you with us here today, and welcome.
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be back again, kicking off this important webinar series. And welcome, everyone. Although we won't have a chance to interact via polls or any other tools today, I'll ask you to grab some paper and something to write with, or have an open document on your computer. It goes without saying that we've been going through quite a time. Sometimes it may seem overwhelming. Others in your circle may be feeling like it's time to move on and put things behind us. But even the nature of change is morphing. It's more frequent, it's faster, unpredictable, and even extreme. There's no one right way to find balance and manage your stress. So I won't have the right recipe for you today. However, there are some perspectives that can be useful. While we know the critical importance of habits like sleep, diet, exercise, mindfulness, and others, today we're going to focus on a different tool for your kit, and that's emotional intelligence. Lisa covered the objectives for us, so we'll just jump right in. So we're going to do a first pulse check question. And we can plan as best as we can, like on the last slide with our seedlings, but in Minnesota at least, we remember that it snows in April and even our flowers aren't safe. So think about whether you're a gardener or not, you've probably got one big emotional trigger that you can identify. You may have more than one, but pay attention to which one jumps into your mind first. Most of us tend to think negative experiences. However, stress can result from positive emotional situations as well. Sit with that for a moment and think about what thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are coming up for you. What are you feeling in your heart, in your mind, and in your gut? Is this your typical response to emotional stress, or is this trigger different? And how are you addressing it? Take a moment to jot down some of your reactions. Although there have been many stress-inducing circumstances, one thing at least many office and non-essential workers have had in common is a sudden shift to working remotely. Ask a group of people about their experience and you'll get a wide range of answers. Some don't want to go back to the office. Some are crossing their fingers for a hybrid policy. Some can't wait to go back. And some simply won't and will choose to move on to a new adventure, maybe on this hillside. And of course, everything in between is also represented. But most people who weren't already working off site, and all of us who interacted with businesses who had to redesign their experience, realized some new types and levels of stress in our lives. Regardless of our working arrangement, we need to consider the impact of not only where we work, but also how we work. Many of us have come to a limit on how many online video meetings are tolerable in a given day. And again, I thank you for making this one a priority for you. Think about what you have learned about yourself in order to stay engaged and productive, and how you are staying connected with your social networks and work teams. One ever-present topic that has bubbled to the surface more recently is burnout, and all of this is related. So hot off the press is a study highlighted in the February 10th issue of Harvard Business Review. Last fall, Jennifer Moss gathered feedback from more than 1,500 respondents in 46 countries. They were in various sectors, roles, and seniority levels, with 67% of them working at or above a supervisor level. While she had already been immersed in research on burnout, these recent results are dramatic. So first up, almost 90% of respondents said their work life was getting worse and their well-being had declined. Hovering more around the middle of the graph here, we've got 62% struggling with workloads, had experienced burnout often or extremely often. A little over half of the people surveyed said that they felt that the pandemic had a large effect on or completely dominated their work. And it goes without saying that we've had other stressors in our lives beyond just the pandemic. 56% said their job demands had increased, and 55% felt unable to balance their home and work life. And you can see here that homeschooling was a significant influence as well. Now, 50% said they felt unable to maintain a strong connection with their friends. Now, when it comes to other individuals in their life, 39% said they felt unable to maintain that strong connection with colleagues. Now, family was less of an issue. Only 25% said they felt unable to maintain that connection with family. Now, as we crawl towards the bottom of the scale, 21% rated their well-being as good. So remember, up at the top, 85% said their well-being had declined. So we see the low numbers coming in here. And maybe not surprisingly, although I'm surprised this is such a low number, 2% rated their well-being as excellent. So this shows that burnout is an issue for us more than ever and something that we need to pay attention to. As we just saw, the burnout is real, and now it's being researched and documented beyond just anecdotally for the pandemic. 6 months after that HBR study, we don't know if much has changed for better or for worse, although we do have some ideas. But fortunately, we have memes and viral videos to capture the state of the world. So if you haven't Googled the Zoom kitten filter, it's a must see. I would say it's perhaps the best of 2021 so far, at least until the new one comes out next week. It's a courtroom scene where the lawyer couldn't turn off the filter, and he reassured the judge that I'm here, I'm not a cat. We're still laughing as we cope with our challenges, and so that's a positive thing. We know that laughter is one good medicine to manage stress and also is reflective of our emotional intelligence. But there is another remedy, and that is what we're going to focus on today is emotional intelligence. So what is EI, sometimes also referred to as EQ? We'll touch on some of the important concepts for understanding emotional intelligence and its potential benefits for you in both your personal and professional lives. So you get a BOGO. Trying to define a concept like emotional intelligence is quite a challenge. It's much like sitting and staring at the enormous diversity of this panel. A few words can't really do justice to the richness and complexity of human interaction. But here is one attempt. Emotional and social skills establish how well we perceive and express ourselves, develop and maintain social relationships, cope with challenges, and use emotional information effectively and meaningfully. In a nutshell, it requires attention to ourselves and to others, understanding emotions and drivers, and how to manage successful relationships. How then does IQ differ from EQ or EI? Well, IQ is how smart you are in one sense. It's a measure of your intellectual, logical, analytical, and rational abilities, and how well you acquire and organize new knowledge. Whereas EI is how well you use the smarts that you have. And this is a measure of your emotional, social, communicative, and relational abilities. Essentially, it's how well you manage and adjust to changing environmental situations. In other words, IQ and your technical skills may get your foot in the door, but EI will determine how far you go. They're not mutually exclusive. Each contributes to your career and life success. The key is to flex all of your abilities and strike the right balance. The good news is that EI can be learned and developed with focused attention. It's important not to let some preconceived notions or misperceptions of emotions get in the way of leveraging the benefits of emotional intelligence. A quick differentiation is often all that's needed to explain. Emotional intelligence is not being nice all of the time, it's being honest. EI is not about being touchy-feely, but it's being aware of your feelings and those of others. It's not being emotional, it's being smart with your emotions. Think about any attachments, either positive or negative, that you may have to your understanding, memories, and experiences of emotions, and how that may influence your stress management. We all have emotions, of course. We can develop our emotional intelligence and use them as strengths. So, how do we actually describe an emotionally intelligent person? Well, here are some ideas. They recognize their emotional reactions to people or situations. They also successfully manage themselves and others in difficult situations. They keep cool under pressure and stay positive. They can express themselves clearly and know how to say the right thing to get the right result. This is, of course, in an authentic and not a manipulative way. They can gain respect from others, and that helps them influence and entice other people to help. They're also able to motivate themselves to get things done. So, who is someone in your life with high emotional intelligence? Or how about somebody with lower EI, if that is easier for you? Think about what characteristics jump out to you that help you define these individuals. So related to the previous question, now think about a great leader that you've known, either directly or indirectly. Could be somebody famous. I'll give you a moment to jot down the first few characteristics that tell you this person is a great leader. Now I'll ask you to put a T next to those characteristics that represent technical knowledge in their discipline. Then put an I next to those characteristics that represent their IQ. Finally, put an E next to those characteristics that represent emotional intelligence. So if we were together and were to pool our responses, guess which column the majority would appear in? Yep, EI. The takeaway here is that emotional intelligence is seen as a critical competency as leaders develop, and it's also remembered fondly by you and others, particularly during stressful and challenging times. When you're talking about emotions and development in the workplace, it's always good to have some numbers to back it up. So here are 3 relevant statistics on the impact of EI. Some of these you may have heard before, especially the first one. When we meet someone, we determine whether we like and trust them within approximately how many seconds? The answer here is 3 to 5. Doesn't give you a lot of time to make that good first impression. Number 2, EI is key to an estimated what percentage of workplace success? This one's a little trickier, but the answer from the study is, sorry about that there, 27 to 46%. So nearly 1/4 to 1/2 of workplace success has been tagged to EI. And then finally, of course, 85 to 95% of the difference between a good leader and an excellent leader is represented by high emotional intelligence. All of us would be happy to work for a good leader. Many of us have worked for excellent leaders. And my guess is that this exercise that you just completed on what makes a great leader just reiterated that. As we've seen, burnout is on the rise, and employee turnover is expected to increase significantly. There are going to be increased pressures on management and employees, and smart organizations will be looking to keep their employees engaged and also show concern for their well-being. You just got a preview of Maya Angelou, so here she is again. It's probably her most famous quote and one that bears repeating here. She's not speaking directly to emotional intelligence per se, but you can see the obvious connection. Words and actions are certainly a part of emotional intelligence, but the emphasis here is on the less tangible feeling that sticks with people indefinitely. Think about the great leader you remembered. What was it about how they made you feel? And is it true that you remember that more than any other words or actions taken? To hit home Maya's point, here's another lens about what we remember in the workplace, whether leaders or peers or direct reports. Our colleagues can take actions or say things as well that make us and our work feel important, significant, and appreciated. These we call our champions. Or they may take a different route and make us feel unimportant, insignificant, and unappreciated. Think of them as the chumps. We've probably all experienced both at one time or another, and from both sides, regrettably, if we're honest. I hope you can walk away with a clearer understanding of how our interactions can have a significant influence on the emotional component of our relationships. So, how do we start to take a more focused look at how we are expressing and perceiving emotions? One of the well-known researchers in this discipline is Daniel Goleman. Looking at his work, we see the building blocks of EI. To begin to think of applying emotional intelligence to your current role, it's about becoming aware and taking action. This is the foundation of emotional intelligence. Note how everything stems from self-awareness in the upper left-hand corner on the way to relationship management in the lower right-hand corner. Note the dimensions of self and others on one axis and awareness and action on the other axis. First, you become aware of yourself. Obviously, that's your self-awareness. But then you adjust your behaviors accordingly, and that is self-management. Perhaps in parallel, you bring that kind of awareness into groups or with others. That's your social awareness. And finally, when you end up managing those interactions, that's relationship management. Now, self-awareness doesn't come naturally to everyone. To tie it to our theme today of stress management, let's do a quick self-reflection exercise on resilience, which is tied to how you show up. So the directions for this personal resilience inventory are pretty simple. I'm going to show you 8 statements, and you can give yourself a rating of yes, no, or to some extent. Also the classic answer, it depends. And then also think about some personal examples and coping strategies that influenced your responses. Think about what you tried in the past that worked or didn't work so well. There's no right or wrong answer or score. It's just an opportunity to get some clarity on where you might be at. So first, directs emotional intelligence at the forefront. And this is still getting a lot of attention both in classrooms and boardrooms again. It is not brand new. It has been around for quite a while, but it's more relevant than ever. And we're seeing that in our conversations. Skills and strengths. This is what you bring to the table. These are your superpowers. Number 3. Chances are you have clear goals at work, but your bigger life meaning may not be so clear. This is finding your purpose, what gets you up in the morning and keeps you moving ahead. Number 4 is how you react and perhaps how you can regulate how you tolerate stress and discomfort. Sometimes our coping mechanisms are hardest to implement when we're feeling this way. With number 5, being solution focused can be thought of as an emphasis on optimism and perhaps seeing your glass half full. Number 6, work-life balance is the pot of gold that we're all seeking. And I've got another exercise later related to this. Number 7, think about who's got your back. Write down the names of your key connections in your professional and personal networks. Nurture them and think breadth as well as depth. Finally, number 8, we're doing a lot of reflecting today with this personal inventory and our pulse check questions. Finally, you might want to check your responses with a trusted person in your life. Self-assessments are a great start, but sometimes honest feedback can uncover our blind spots and give us some valuable aha moments. So think about your reaction to your results here. Are you happy with it? Seeing more question marks and X's than you'd care to? Consider this some valuable input as you confirm what you're feeling right now and how your tendencies may impact a given situation. The good news is we do have quite a bit of control over these factors, just not 100% of the time. Related to the question in the inventory, I understand and manage my emotions and feelings related to emotional intelligence. Your brain plays a bigger role in this than you might realize. The amygdala is the emotional center of your brain. Information comes in through our senses and is processed through our amygdala. Think of it as the grand central station, especially for emotions like rage or panic. If there's a situation that triggers us, our amygdala can hijack us with a cascade of stress hormones and prevent us from accessing the higher executive function regions of our brain. Imagine this as the fight or flight response to the saber-toothed tiger. When this happens, we are robbed of our ability to think clearly, use decision-making, problem-solving, planning, time management. Our own hijacks can also trigger a similar response in others, causing a ripple effect in relationships. There is a cost to it, and often a health and well-being impact over time that wears down our resilience instead of boosting it. So, time for another pulse check. Take a moment to answer the question: when was your last amygdala hijack and how did you recover? Maybe you'd rather not relive it, but we can seek wisdom from our experiences. And while we may not be able to always control this, we can learn to anticipate, mitigate, control it with awareness and action through our strategies. And that leads us to our next section. We've covered some of the who's, what's, why's, and where's of emotional intelligence. Now we'll explore a model that puts some rigor around different components of this awareness and sets us up to explore the how we develop higher emotional intelligence through prioritizing some strategies. As noted earlier, there are many researchers in the EI field. Today, I'll be focusing on one model called the EQI 2.0. It's a highly actionable, reliable, and valid global development tool that's normed to different groups. Of course, we won't be taking the assessments today. There is a self-assessment and a 360 available. You may be interested in signing up for the CCAP seminar that I'll be facilitating in June, where you'll have the opportunity to take the online assessment and receive a robust report. This model includes 5 distinct aspects of emotional and social functioning. Notice that each of the 5 categories has 3 subcategories. Self-perception is about understanding your emotions. Self-expression, expressing your emotions. Interpersonal, developing and maintaining relationships. Decision-making, using emotions to make better decisions. Stress management, coping with challenges. Plus, there's a well-being indicator. It's an indicator of overall well-being that impacts overall emotional intelligence. As noted earlier, the theory and research behind this model reinforces the fact that, unlike IQ, these are skills that can be developed. In our short time today, we're going to focus only on one slice of the pie, stress management, which is defined as coping with emotions of unfamiliar and unpredictable circumstances while remaining hopeful and resilient. The stress management composite consists of 3 different factors: flexibility, stress tolerance, and optimism. So here are some definitions for those 3 factors. Flexibility is adapting your emotions, thoughts, and behaviors to unfamiliar, unpredictable, dynamic circumstances or ideas. So how well are you able to flex and adapt and manage ambiguity that comes into your life? Next up is stress tolerance. This is coping with stressful or difficult situations and believing that you can have some type of influence and manage it in a positive manner. The positivity rolls into the 3rd factor of optimism. It's an indicator of one's positive attitude and outlook on life. So, how hopeful and resilient are you able to remain despite occasional setbacks that come your way? So, let's do another pulse check. Understanding that you don't have a lot of detailed information about these factors, rely on the previous definitions as well as your base knowledge and rate yourself on these 3 as underused, just right, or overused. Now, these are rather arbitrary labels, and the range for just right can be quite broad, but it gives you an idea of how the competencies aren't static and can be developed. So some words that might connect with you here. Flexibility underused means you might prefer routine, be more rigid, like perseverance. For just right, flexibility looks like going with the flow, being open to new views. If overused, flexibility can look like lacking follow through or being bored. For stress tolerance, underused might mean fearfulness, anxiety, avoidance, or reactiveness. If you're just right with your stress tolerance, you may have found your coping mechanisms, stability, and relaxation. If it's overused, you may be disconnected, or you may even have some blind spots that you're not aware of. For your optimism, if it's underused, that may demonstrate fear, pessimism, uncertainty. If you're just right, you may feel confident, full of possibilities, and hopeful. If your optimism is overused, you may have a reliance on blind faith. You may even be seen as a bit naive. So think about which one jumps out for you and why here. Have you received any feedback before on these characteristics? Taking the self-assessment or the 360 assessment would provide you with some real numbers on these. So let's dig into a little bit more detail here, starting with flexibility. When you think about the sources of stress in our lives, many times they arise from unexpected or ambiguous circumstances. To focus on building your flexibility, consider these ideas. Demonstrate learning from mistakes. Identify a champion to support you if you decide to rethink your stance on an issue. Recognize where anxiety or other emotions trigger your inflexibility. Before saying yes, think if the request fits your values and priorities. Try experiences outside of your comfort zone to react to new challenges. Be agile and expect change because we know that change is here to stay. Finally, leverage your curiosity and creativity to grow. Think about the opportunities that you have to stretch. So taking a look at this list of strategies, think about which ones are your strengths, and in particular, one that can stretch you. Remember that you have great flexibility in your mind, including through which lens you wish to view the world around you. Think about a recent situation that didn't go the way that you planned, whether it was a miscommunication, a misunderstanding, a missed handoff, or some other miss. Reframing is a great strategy to use. If you can be disciplined to reflect on both positive and negative experiences, ask yourself these questions. How could I look at this differently? Is there a lesson to be learned here? And if this happens again, how might I react differently? What if I were in another person's shoes? Think about using some of your other strengths. Those might be perspective, creativity, or empathy to motivate yourself to see things in a different light. You might be able to consider other possibilities or try to see things from another person's viewpoint. As you figure out ways of thinking, doing, being, whether it's in a new environment, a new career path, or another adventure, use your strengths to influence what that might look like for you and be open to not knowing and just going along for the ride. Of course, there are many kinds of flexibility, and even though we aren't focusing on physical habits today, I'd like to invite you to try out your favorite stretch if you haven't already been doing that, since we're a little over halfway through our hour. We know the work from home setups haven't always been ideal or ergonomic. So while we're flexing our mental muscles, try it in tandem with building some real muscles. The second factor is stress tolerance. While we're all adept at some preventive measures, think about some other suggestions. Balance your focus between long-term strategy and short-term bandages. Both are important. Minimize concern by talking through the likelihood of worst-case scenarios. Sometimes just talking it through can help relieve some of that anxiety. Focus more on things you can control and less on things out of your control. Anticipate stress and proactively adopt some basic good health and wellness habits. Ask for help and also offer it to others. Finally, be honest with yourself about the quality of life and that price that you pay for taking on excess stress. This last one requires a good look in the mirror to figure out what your priorities are, what you're saying yes to that you have to say no to something else. Again, identify at least one strength that you have on this list that can keep you going, but then also identify one stretch area. Granted, it's not always possible to forecast a stressful situation. However, when it is possible, there are some strategic moves to consider. Even things that you can likely control to give you more of a sense of predictability, comfort, and focus. Take, for example, an important conversation that you need to have with an influential sponsor of a project you're responsible for. Past experiences have given you cause for concern about getting the resources and support that you need so that the critical work can move forward. You consider how to show up at your best by thinking of some minor but effective strategies that have worked for you in other situations. You might apply some of these criteria based on what you know about the other person's preferences. Listed are just a few ideas for this scenario. And you're right, they do seem pretty simple. What they do require is some time and some intention to make them work. It's just one example highlighting the importance of small details that matter. Sometimes there are ongoing issues that grow seemingly larger than life. Think of a relationship or another work issue that causes you stress. Are there any elephants that you need to address? These might be at the organizational level, might be at the team level, or even a personal individual level. How can you get to the root of that problem? And ask yourself what is not being said in the room or outside of the room. This can cause you additional stress, and one way to manage that is to rely on your strength of courage and bravery. While addressing issues may cause you more discomfort, the benefits may outweigh the consequences. So think about why that particular situation jumped into your mind as memorable. Do many of your challenging moments tend to fall into one or more areas of your life? And what might that signal about the amount of attention that you need to direct to it? Question 6 on that personal resilience inventory asked if you have a good work-life balance. But we use this expression so frequently that it seems watered down, and we may not even think about what it really means for us to have balance. Here's one way to keep a finger on the pulse of the various dimensions of a balanced life. Balance is personal, unique to each person. What may represent the balance for some may be stressful or even boring for others. For this exercise, consider these 10 key pillars and rate how fulfilled you are with each of them on a scale of 0 to 10. with 0 meaning you are completely unfulfilled with this dimension, and 10 meaning you are extremely fulfilled with this part of your life. For each of these last 3, you may decide to give 2 ratings. After all 10 pillars have been rated, determine an overall life satisfaction rating for yourself. Each of us will define these differently, as well as the right recipe that works at a given point in time in our lives. There may be reasons why one area is now showing up as particularly important to you because it's a given time or phase in your life, and maybe you've given extra attention to it. But scanning your overall results may highlight some surprising gaps where you've sacrificed one area over another. You can step back to think about whether some conscious rebalancing might be appealing. Think about what would it take to reach a 10 on one that you have a lower score for. The most important thing, though, is to choose one priority, not lots of them. Keep it simple, gain those wins, and boost your confidence. So this balance can and should be assessed over time. A regular check on how balanced you are can highlight useful patterns, and it can help you learn and develop self-awareness about where you can apply your stress management skills. The third and final factor for stress management is optimism. And here are some recommendations. Use your strength of hope to consider these possibilities. Expect success from your work and relationships and start visualizing it. Share your positive beliefs to inspire others about possibilities. Be aware of others' verbal and nonverbal reaction to your optimism and seek to bridge gaps. There is such a thing as being overly optimistic, given a certain crowd. Seek out a trusted colleague who can coach you on a challenging situation. Note and appreciate daily moments of gratitude. And finally, spend more time with happy people. Positivity can be contagious, but this is definitely easier for some people, more so than others. So again, take just a moment, identify one area that stands out as a particular strength of yours that you could share. And then also one area that you know is a stretch and that you'd be willing to commit to. Wise words here from Brene Brown. I like the image of joy and resilience as a reservoir that can be replenished and fuel us during the challenging times. It speaks to the importance of recognizing small lessons that we've learned and small wins that we've accumulated over time, and that will create a safety net for us. Think about what brings you joy, both the big and the little things, and how you can replicate those moments and savor them. What does your tank look like today? Do you feel like you're almost out of gas and need to stop and refuel or recharge? Or do you have plenty to get you going where you need to be? Think about how focusing on your optimism can boost your resilience and vice versa. Resilience is adapting well in the face of adversity or significant sources of stress. This can be a single event spread out over a longer period of time. It's not a one and done, but gaining the awareness and mitigating strategies to cope can help diminish that impact. It's managing difficult circumstances that can also empower personal growth, believe it or not. So the best change, negative or positive, is when we can reflect on the lessons learned and realize that we're stronger and more adaptable in anticipation of the next time, because we know there will be a next time. Resilience is an opportunity to cultivate gratitude and other positive emotions. So building on the personal growth potential, sometimes it takes a disappointment to realize what we take for granted and to be more conscious of it. Resilience includes behaviors, thoughts, and actions that anyone can learn and develop. I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. As many research studies have shown, people who express their strengths, including optimism, tend to be more resilient, empowered, energized, and engaged. And then finally, resilience is something that takes time and intentionality to build. Leaving today with some awareness of some steps to incorporate into your daily routine or into your mindset already puts you on the path to managing stress better. To summarize, it sounds like hard work, but in fact, resilience is ordinary, not extraordinary. Whatever resilience and stress management means for you, you can get there with optimism. So we've covered a lot in this hour. What is one takeaway that you have from our discussion today about emotional intelligence that you can put into practice in order to bounce back or even bounce forward from a stressful situation? I encourage you to write it down and later on a sticky note and put it close by as a reminder. To wrap up, learning agility is a critical skill to develop as we move through changes. To keep the learning going, join me for one of these other 6-hour interactive virtual continuing education and professional studies courses that I'll be facilitating. It would be great to have you join us. The emotional intelligence class usually has a waiting list, so jump on it if you're interested. You'll take an online assessment and receive a personal report with your results. And if you're interested in learning more, please reach out to me. Final takeaways for you. Be sure to find your support system. Remember to use your strengths regularly and check in on what's working with your relationships. Recognize your progress and celebrate successes, no matter how small they are. So thank you for attending and participating. And Lisa, I'm going to turn it back to you if we have time for a few questions.
We do. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your wisdom, especially on a topic that's so important during this time. So we will now move it to the question and answer portion of this webinar. So our first question comes from a listener who says, I'm curious how you're defining burnout. Is this related to workload specifically, or are you considering other factors such as control, rewards, community, fairness, and values?
Great question. I think it could be all of the above. And I think that burnout is one of those terms that if we try to define it and pull it apart, it's like emotional intelligence. It's so much bigger than what it appears on the surface. So I completely understand that we all may be thinking of it a different way, especially given the challenges that we are managing right now, both at work, in our personal lives, if we look internally, if we look externally at the larger world. It's all about how we decide to find that balance. And burnout can show up in many different ways. So you can take it down to the tactical level. You know, what projects do I have on my plate? When are the due dates? What are the deadlines? Or it could be much broader than that as well. It could be struggling with personal relationships, struggling with illness, struggling with uncertainty about one's future. I think there's a wide spectrum here, and it's a very valid point that we need to be clear about how we're defining it for ourselves and for others who come seek, guidance or support from us.
I think obviously those are amazing points, and we do have a few more questions. So one listener says, how do you navigate discrimination while being smart with your emotions? So for example, in my department, we have documented records of women having less voice than men. I've witnessed several times in my career where women were quite smart with their emotions, but their person was an obstacle for others in the room. So again, that's how do you navigate discrimination while being smart with your emotions?
Mm. So another excellent question. I would love to talk to this individual a little bit more in detail and get some of the background on this. So I can just speak to some broader points here. So when somebody's voice is heard less than someone else's, there needs to be some type of communication. And the first question I would ask as a consultant is to get a lay of the land, to get an organizational pulse check, or in this case, sounds like a team pulse check or a departmental one. There are some underlying issues going on here because we do need to respect the diversity and the inclusion in our organizations. And of course, we do know that diversity and inclusion goes far beyond just race, ethnicity, gender, but this is a very specific gender question. Now, the person who asked the question noted that there, I believe you said there was some documentation that women's voices were heard less than men. So I'd be a little curious what that might entail. Is that based on survey results, engagement survey results in the department? Is it based on decisions that are made as a team versus decisions made by leadership? I think this is not going to be a very satisfying quick answer, but I think the first question is to find out who can you talk to in that department. Is there a safe environment? Is there someone that you could open up these conversations with to find out really what is below the surface here? So think of it like the iceberg. You're seeing how people show up to meetings. You're seeing how people are reacted when they do try to make their voice heard. Are you seeing all pieces of the puzzle? Is there something that you're missing? Are there some blind spots either that you have, or more importantly, that the leaders of that organization have? And so how can you come together to think about, I'm thinking about really the broader lens of emotional intelligence. So we focused on just the stress management portion of it, but if you go back to the other pieces of the pie, and you'll receive a copy of the slide deck as well. We've got self-perception, we've got self-expression, we've got interpersonal relationships, decision-making, problem solving. All of these are outcomes of our emotional intelligence, and some of those are visible and some of them are not. So I think I'm going to leave it at that, but just acknowledge the complexities here. It goes back to that first slide I had where the three people were sitting on the bench, like at a museum, looking up at the panel of all of these different photos. All of these people representing different experiences, different goals, different ways of communicating. And that's what we have to navigate. That's why it's so tricky. But I appreciate the question and would like to follow up as well if that person is interested.
Yeah, and I have two more questions. So the first one from a listener is, I'm curious how factors such as structural racism may influence this framework for how to grow in emotional intelligence.
Yes. So that's a very good question as well. And it's another layer of this approach to addressing the full human potential. So anytime we try to peel this onion, we run the risk of overemphasizing one aspect of what makes us human versus the other aspect. So I want to be very clear that today we are talking about emotional intelligence, and I tried to pull out that piece that just addresses, these three stress management factors. Obviously, there are many more, and then obviously, if you want to layer on all of these other identity pieces that make us who we are, it does become more complicated. They do overlap. They do blend. For example, another class I teach here on that list, there's communicating across cultures, which is really an assessment for cultural intelligence. So similar to emotional intelligence, it's taking a different lens at how we look at cross-cultural communication and multiculturalism. So I think again, it's in some ways it's a bit of a similar approach to the previous question about some gender inequities. You'd want to sit down and think about what information do I have? What information am I looking for? Who's the best person to answer these questions for me? What's the best way to identify and peel down to the core of what the issue is? Um, so often it comes across, and I'll be the first to admit it too, when I'm presenting models like this, it seems like it's the be all end all, that it's an easy solution. I can take this assessment, I'll know, what type I am or what my score is, and that will help me, relate wonderfully to everyone else in my path. We know that's not true. What it is it's an opportunity to open the conversation. And so I would suggest that structural racism is certainly an issue that has been compounded lately, and we need to open those discussions and relate it to emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, and our communication. So very big question, lots of exciting possibilities there as we decide to take on those opportunities.
Yeah, and then our final question from a listener is, how is emotional intelligence affected by depression and anxiety?
Okay. So, first of all, I am not in any way a licensed psychologist or a counselor. I'm an executive coach, which is a very different skill set. However, as we said, these lines do get blurred often, and many of the things that we talked about today cross over into your physical, your mental, your emotional wellness as well. So, it actually brings up a very good point, because I would like to mention uh, two resources that I think are very important. And I know we've got many, many people joining us on the call today. Many of them may be involved with the University of Minnesota and others not. But for those of you who aren't aware, the University of Minnesota has a wonderful organization called the Center for Spirituality and Healing. And they take a much more, I think, holistic wellness approach to this, which aligns very nicely with what we've talked about today. So I encourage you to Google that site at the University of Minnesota. And then also, many of you at your organizations have access to something called the Employee Assistance Program, or EAP. Oftentimes there are free resources, including free counseling, available to you. And it's always very important to make sure that you feel comfortable, you feel confident to seek out additional advice and help when you need it, whether that's from your own healthcare professional or a resource offered through work. So I think I'll leave that one at that. But I appreciate the caller bringing it up, because we know that people feel stress and pressure in very, very different ways, and it comes and goes, and it shows up at different times and in different ways. So we need to acknowledge that, and please do check on any resources or any support in your network that can help you continue this discussion. There are many positive opportunities to move forward with your emotional intelligence and help you seek that balance that you're looking for in your professional life and your personal life as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your wisdom, those resources, and for taking the time to be with us today. I know it was certainly a pleasure having you here, so thank you so much. Would you be able to share the next slide for the presentation, please? So thank you everyone for listening. As I mentioned earlier, we will send a link to the webinar recording as well as the slides for this webinar in the following days. Please take a moment to let us know what you thought about this webinar by clicking on the survey link in the description portion of the YouTube video. The survey is brief and your response will really help us shape future webinar experiences. If you enjoyed this webinar and would like to continue engaging in similar topics, please register for our upcoming webinars. So teamwork, small acts and big wins, and also mindsets and the power of perspectives. All of these webinars are part of our current webinar series, which is avoiding burnout at work. My contact information is also listed on this slide if you'd like to learn more. So thank you so much again for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Take care, stay safe, and be well.